Ladies and gentlemen, it is certainly a pleasure having you here with us this morning in this Ministry of Labor and Social Security's Western Region Labor Talks Workshop. And we have been with you in Western Jamaica more than once. The last time we were here in this kind of way, we were out in 2019. That's the last time we were out in West. And I recall we were at the Montego Bay Convention Center. And the Montego Bay Convention Center reported that it had not seen so many people in a very long time, because at that time we had over 2,000 persons with us. Today, you are amongst the selected persons that are here in person, but we are going to be joined virtually by many others. I am Jillian Corodas, Divisional Director, Industrial Relations and Allied Services in the Ministry of Labor, and I am joined by some very esteemed persons. And I just want you to put a name to face, and therefore I'm just going to ask them to stand. Although you're going to obviously see them in the program, I think it's very important that you know who they are. So we have with us President of the Employers Federation, Mr. David Wan. And I always say he's a 1-1. Thank you very much, David. And with us, representing the Jamaica Confederation of Trade Unions, is Mr. Kurt Fletcher. Kurt, thank you for being here. And we accept apologies for Mrs. Helene Davis-White, who unfortunately will not be here with us today. We also apologize on behalf of our Honorable Minister, who you know how he loves to be in the crowd and amidst the people. But unfortunately, he's not able to make it this morning. And also, our Permanent Secretary, Mrs. Colette Roberts-Risden, has sent her apology as she's unavoidably absent. But having sent apology, they have both wished us very well as we meet today, and I'm sure that they are somewhere online as soon as they can to watch some of the proceedings, and they know that we'll come up with some very productive interventions. We will share ideas in the true sense of social dialogue. We are a country that is very small, but as they say in Jamaica, we're little, but we're talawa. And the countries that are going to be ahead internationally are those that sit in the way that we are sitting today. We are sitting as employer groupings. We're sitting as worker representatives. We are sitting as civil society. And we have with us a gentleman that I think everybody needs to know. And he is Mr. Emil Leiber. And he's president of the Jamaican Bar Association. Former president. That is correct. And also managing partner of Don Cox. So he keeps us in line in law, and we're going to hear from him. We also have, as part of our panel, we have Mrs. Jackie Millington. Stand for me, Jackie. And this lady is in no other sector but mining. Lidford Mining. That's correct. Lots of, I speak very loud and the microphone is very loud as well. That is double dose. So we want to thank you for being here, Jackie, to share from the perspective of a woman, one, and two, in an area that many of us don't normally hear about in the regular mix of things. So we want to hear what's happening in your industry and mining. We want to understand that mining lends itself to everything development in terms of construction and everything that feeds from construction. There's a trade unionist, late Lloyd Goodley, that said that when you visit a country and you see the cranes in the air, it means there's development, there's growth. And in my mind, the mining sector contributes to that. We have with us Miss Tina Mae Davis, Event Manager 2020 Jamaica. And if you know anything about entertainment, you will know something about Tina. But I'm going to wait until the panel discussion starts. So all of you who don't know and have not started to Google her yet, you will hear some more about that shortly, right? So thank you so much, Tina, for being here. We also have with us seated Miss Doctor. You see, when your friends are so close to you for many years. Dr. Lauren Marsh. Lauren. And he is head of the Hugh Shearer Labor Studies Institute. And they have done tremendous work in preparation for us to be here, because they have done a lot of research in relation to the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, especially on workers. And also, they have continued to train lots of worker representatives and even employers from time to time. Right, David? I know they're in partnership with you as well. Good. All right, I do know that there's another panelist, Jennifer. That's right. Jennifer Chambers, please stand. Ms. Chambers. And she's the HR generalist for Associated Manufacturers Limited. And we know them as Walker's Wood. So the sweet tasting jerk sauces, that's where it's coming from, right? And we're going to be hearing how they have continued to provide us with those products. And I know that there's another panelist that will be joining us very shortly. And he is none other than Mr. Daniel Kazarin. And he is the general manager of this wonderful Royalton Luxury Hotels. So he'll be joining us shortly. But let us get into the messages, the greetings. And I'm going to be inviting the Jamaica Employers Federation, Mr. David Wan, to come forward.
Good morning, everyone. Morning, Madam Master of Ceremonies. And even though the Minister and PS are not here, just want to acknowledge them also. So we are distinguished ladies and gentlemen. We are very pleased to be here today to take part in this Western Region Labor Talks workshop. Commendations to the ministry in organizing this forum, especially in the western end of the island, Gillian. I think we're all guilty of assuming that Kingston and St. Andrew is all of Jamaica. So it's good to have this here. All right. So today, we meet to discuss the labor market under the banner of repositioning the labor market post-COVID. A very relevant topic, very, right in front of us these days. I start by looking at the employer's view of the impact on our business because of COVID. Just very quickly, number one, we are much more conscious of contingency plans and what our response is going to be. So we are prepared for weather disruption, cyber attacks, and of course, the new thing is pandemic-related work stoppage, and what is your contingency plan? So we have learned a lot over the last 2 years. Secondly, most businesses are now forced to offer contactless transactions, home delivery of goods, work from home, which is either hybrid or full-time, So maybe the only unfortunate thing is, in a study we've done, our estimate is that 65% of the jobs in Jamaica are not geared up for work from home. So the nurses, the drivers, the police, the manufacturing employees. So, but be that as it may, I think the work from home and the hybrid is the most popular route that most employers are taking. Third, businesses that offer, real in-person service with close personal contact are particularly vulnerable to the effects of pandemics. The beauty parlors, the dentists, the hospitality and entertainment industry, the cinema industry, those got hit very hard. So the lesson learned was, you need to gear up yourself in case there's another pandemic. God forbid there's none, but those industries were hurt very badly. So those are 2 or 3 of the things that businesses have learned in the pandemic. So let's move to the impact on the labor force. The Jamaican labor force has done an extremely commendable job in demonstrating resiliency during COVID. Although the economy slid into a recession, it has bottomed out and is making a steady recovery. Some countries have not yet turned the corner in the decline due to COVID. So from that perspective, our labor force has served us well, done a good job. Now, as the country continues its recovery, we need to be cognizant of the pivoting that the labor force and employers needs to do in order to make our recovery sustainable over a long period. Now, focusing on the labor force, some of these items that they need to be aware of we're recommending for pivoting is, number one, digital skills training. Workers need to be trained, upskilled in all digital tools for business, whether it's transaction processing, whether it's customer service, whether it's problem resolution, all the digital tools, our labor force needs to be trained and retrofitted to handle all these. Digital tools make enterprises resilient from all types of shocks. Plus, it makes business more efficient and boosts productivity. I see a lady here from the Productivity Center, so that ties into business productivity. So it's good for business, good for the workforce. Number 2, preparation of jobs of the future. The green energy, robotics, electric vehicles, they're all poised to take up a greater share of our and the world economy in the next 3 to 5 years. So as an example, the Ukraine war has forced Europe to hasten its exit from fossil fuels coming out of Russia. So, they never thought they'd have to move this quickly. This means not just importing oil from some other country, but it also means more solar power, more hydrothermal power. You know, Iceland has a lot of hydropower, hydrothermal power, and more electric vehicles. So Jamaica has achieved a lot in clean energy. When you think about Paradise Park or Wigton Wind Farm, those are big accomplishments. However, much more is needed if we are to escape the high oil prices. In our view, a strategic thrust is needed to ensure that we have the supporting cast of the trained labor force to allow these new technologies to flourish in Jamaica. So we'll need retrofitting of the workforce to be competent as solar energy technicians, robotics technicians, electric vehicle technicians. So, you know, these are necessary, and this is coming in the near future, the push to green energy. The third area that I want to speak about is, I call it labor market inefficiency. We have some dysfunctional areas of the labor market which need a broad strategic look and a plan to vastly improve the efficiency. Now, what do we mean by that? Consider this. We have 700,000 persons who are classified as outside the labor force. Those are persons who are, you know, above the age of 17 or 18 that are able-bodied but not participating in the workforce. And some of them are retirees, some are students, tertiary students, but a good amount of those 700,000 persons are not participating in the labor force. Next, we have a shortage of skilled workers in some industries. There was a lot of news recently. The Prime Minister was speaking at a site, at a Rio hotel site. There's a shortage of skilled workers. Plus, we have some shortages of workers in hotels and BPO. Sometimes there's a challenge in finding all the people that they need. On top of all that, you know, I note that the pass rate for the CXCs each year for the cohort that does the CXC is about 50% that get 3 or more subjects. So I believe, but I'm not sure, we need more analysis, but the low pass rate in the CXCs, the 50% pass rate, is fueling that pool of 700,000 persons outside the labor force. My hypothesis is, you know, you leave school with 1 or 2 CXCs, or no CXCs, no BPO is going to hire you, no reputable private sector company is going to hire you, neither will the government agencies or ministries, so you're drawn to informality, whether as a contractor or with an informal employer, or to crime. So you show up in the data as outside the labor force. Now, even if my hypothesis is wrong, the Ministry of Education needs to devise a plan to lift the rate of this bar of passing 3 CXCs, which is what many employers require as a minimum. We need to raise that bar to 80 to 90%. It's going to take some time, but we need to get there. This has benefits to employers in the quality of staff they can utilize in their organization. So it's a win-win for everyone, but we need to raise it. Then there's the shortage of skilled workers. Now, is it that there's truly a shortage? Or is it that there are persons who are trained on the job but not certified, so that when a company like Rio is putting down billions in the ground here in Jamaica, maybe they're saying, you know, I'm putting $1 billion in the ground here. I don't want an uncertified electrician or plumber putting my investment at risk. So I will import a trained plumber or electrician to do the job. So this needs investigation by PIOJ or the Ministry of Labor so we can try to close this gap, whether by certification drive of existing workers, or is it that we need to ramp up apprenticeships to build the cohort of skilled workers here It needs deeper analysis. So the labor market information system, which I'm moving on to a different area, is up and running. But how do we mobilize in short order workers to fill the gaps in, say, the hospitality industry when demand really picks up, which I think we're almost getting there, because a lot of the workers who were in the industry at the start of the pandemic have either migrated, upskilled themselves, gone to different occupations, moved to a different industry like BPO. So they're not available for a quick recall to hospitality when the engines really start rolling, which it seems that they will very soon. I also see, Madam Chair, there's a job fair for cruise ship companies to hire 10,000 Jamaican workers coming soon. Now, can the LMIS provide such number of candidates to the cruise ship industry? And they need even more than that because they don't hire everyone that they interview. So the point I'm making is there more that we can do with the LMIS? So, you know, as I close, I say the elements of the labor market inefficiencies need to be looked at in broad strategic fashion by the Ministry of Labor, Ministry of Education, HART, PIOJ, and I'm appealing for this to be done for the benefit of the workers and employers of the country. So, ladies and gentlemen, I've told you a little about some of the things that, you know, the labor market pivoting that we need to do. For example, digital skills training, just to recap what I've told you, the preparation for jobs of the future. And the third item, which is really near and dear to us, is the labor market inefficiency. We have groups of people, you know, outside the labor force. We have shortages over here, and we have underpinning all that, you know, the low pass rate in the education in the CXCs that is affecting some of the labor shortages. So we need to get that fixed and fixed quickly. So again, I want to say we are most pleased to be here today to take part in this forum. And I'm pleased to see it taking part, you know, outside of Kingston, just so we can get the message out to everyone. And commendations once more to the Ministry of Labor for putting on this forum and inviting all these panelists and experts to share information with the interest groups here in the Western region. So, ladies and gentlemen, I wish you a productive and informative forum today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. One, and that is why I describe him as a 1-1, right? All right, so he was the opening batsman, and he definitely helped me to set the pace, and I veered from the program that you have in front of you, and I didn't even take the prayer, because I wanted Mr. One, the 1-1, to set the pace, and then we will invite the Lord's presence. We have with us Bishop Reverend Cecil Brown, JP, and he's from the Burnt Savannah New Testament Church. Please, Bishop.
Let us pray. Father, we give you thanks for giving us this opportunity to gather here today. Thank you for protecting us as we traveled and for providing the way for us to meet, learn, and grow. We begin our workshop. We dedicate this time to you. We pray for the presenters, the attendees, and the organizers who made this workshop possible. Your word says in Colossians 3 and verse 17, and whatsoever we do, whether in word or deed, do it all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God our Father through him. Thank you for blessing our time together and help us to make new connections, gain wisdom to do the work you have set before us. We give you honor and glory. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Thank you very much, Bishop, for inviting the Lord's presence, because Jamaica, land we love, is always blessed. Now, at this time, we're going to be inviting another person to set the pace for today's session, and I'm going to invite Mr. Kurt Fletcher to bring greetings on behalf of the workers, which is the Jamaica Confederation of Trade Unions. Let us put our hand together for Mr. Fletcher.
Good morning, everyone. Madam Master of Ceremonies, Ms. Jillian Carrodos. I know the minister is not here, and also the PS, but greetings extended to them as well. I am here on behalf of Mrs. Helen Davis White, President of the Confederation of Trade Unions, to address you on this very important topic, repositioning Jamaica's labor market post-COVID-19. It is quite refreshing that over the last few years, the Ministry of Labor has embarked on following what has been a traditional way of doing things coming from out of the International Labor Organization, trying to get a tripartite social dialogue going. This has been evident in the number of workshops that they have constantly been putting on across the island. It is very instructive that at all these forums, there is the Employers Federation, people from civil society, and indeed us as trade unionists. What has become very disappointing to me is even sitting at those tables around the island, there seems to be a social distancing still among the parties there. So I was thinking this morning, and I said, even though we're at the table, we are separated by plexiglass speaking to each other. Now, it is high time that we use these opportunities to remove those social distancing protocols and the plexiglass and have very frank discussions on how to move our country forward. Front and center of coming out of COVID was the Confederation of Trade Unions, despite the fact that union density across the island has been plummeting. Excepting for the BPO sector, and to which we also had some participation in developing those protocols. The major earner for us, the tourism sector, we were front and center in developing those protocols for our workers and the business community to return to work. That is how we participate in our tripartite relationships. We have looked at various issues affecting our workers out of COVID-19. And out of the International Labor Organization, I think what we have, and 2 days ago we were blessed with the presence of the regional director for the ILO, Mr. Zuma, who reminded us that at the heart of COVID and COVID recovery, the theme is around a people-centered recovery. We ought not to forget that. I was having a discussion at my table earlier on with Mrs. Chambers in relation to a myth that has been promulgated over the years and years, and it's almost as if it is now a stain on the union movement. I was sharing with her that even up to last night, and you can Google it, have you Googled it yet? That at the heart of productivity, which I know Mr. One always speaks of, and I'm sorry the minister is not here, because every speech he makes, he mentions productivity, the increase of productivity. How many of us know that at the heart of productivity around the world, that the most productive countries are those countries that have high union density, meaning those countries that have a high degree of organized labor. Now, even though we are sitting at the table, part of the social distancing that we are observing from the trade union movement is a resistance to have our workers become organized. If we value productivity, and I dare all of you to go on Google now and find all the researches that have been done, you will understand that when you have organized labor, just as we did out of COVID, where labor was able to sit with capital, sit with our social partners to develop protocols so that we are now on the rebound, as Mr. Wan says, we will understand that it is very integral to all parties that they have representation and equal representation at the table. So as we look to reposition ourselves, I ask us, the popular word around these parts these days is pivoting. I ask us to repivot, because at the heart of productivity coming up was always a organized, centered labor. In going forward, we recognize that the ministry and certainly the Employers Federation play a very important part in how we get to that stage. I am therefore beseeching our employers, as we are here, and all the HR practitioners, that we should allow productivity to thrive by realizing that a people-centered progression forward is what will eventually take us out of COVID-19. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Fletcher. And what we have been hearing is, in fact, social dialogue that can lead to a social partnership. Isn't that true? Right. Because we heard Mr. Wan speak about what is required to have a resilient labor market. He spoke about the fact that it requires a multi-stakeholder approach. He spoke about the fact that we have to start with our education system as well, making sure that our young school leavers are getting the certifications, the pass rates, so that they're highly qualified and can be the best in the labor market. He also touched on the fact that we need to be looking at all the opportunities that presents. And we have to look at the green economy. We have to look at digitization, robotics. Some of our Caribbean and obviously Jamaican young persons are exceptionally talented. We need to ensure that we are honing that kind of talent. And here it is. We are here, and I can't forget that. He's saying that the LMIS, the Labor Market Information System, Mr. Ford, should be, and I'm paraphrasing him, should be a national portal so that when we're looking for employees, there is that one common place that will find highly skilled and ready pool of workers. So we are hearing from the worker representatives through the Jamaica Confederation of Trade Unions, Mr. Kurt Fletcher, that we need a people-centered approach. So they have really set the pace for what we're here to discuss, the labor market, supply and demand, looking at how do we ensure our labor market is resilient, how do we continue on a trajectory of growth, how do we remain internationally, globally competitive. And I started by saying today that we're little but with Talawa. All right, at this time, I think we should break my probably monotone. And there's a special gentleman who will be doing that, and his name is Mr. Andre Gillespie. Let us put our hands for Andre Gillespie. You see how better he is than I?
Good morning to you all. How are you doing this morning? Yeah, good to see you. Give yourself a clap. I was there sorted out saxophone. I have another technical difficulty, but I'm gonna play anyways. Enjoy this song.
Ladies and gentlemen, all, what lovely people we have on the platform with me. Let us put our hands together for them. There is one person that is not on the platform, but I understand that he is going to be returning shortly, Dr. Lauren Marsh. So I will be introducing again, and when I call by name, they will just say their 2 sentences about what they do, and then we'll get into the panel discussion. All right, so I have to my extreme left, Miss Jennifer Chambers. And Jennifer, just test your mic, make sure that we're working.
Hello, good morning.
So go ahead, introduce yourself so that they know what you do, where you make your spices.
Okay, I'm Jennifer Chambers and I'm the HR generalist at Associated Manufacturers Limited, formerly Walkers with Caribbean Foods. I work with people, and in regards to Mr. Kurt, who's saying that union is the best, I'm thinking that if you have a good HR practitioner and make your staff comfortable, it's not really necessary.
Well, so you understand the type of powerhouse we're dealing with today. Kurt, you will have a chance to rebut that at an appropriate time, or just simply agree in social partnership, right? And industrial harmony. All right, so thank you very much. And sitting right beside her is Miss Tina Mae Davis. And Tina, I'm going to allow you to tell them exactly what they need to know.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Tina Mae Davis, Principal Director of 2020 Jamaica, which is a full-service event planning company. Previous to that, I served as the festival manager for Reggae Sumfest for 20 years.
So I don't know where Sumfest come from now. I remember I said Google her. That was your hint.
And I've worked on a number of events throughout the years, including Jamaica Jazz and Blues, Rebel Salute, and some others. So I come with a lot of experience in large-scale festivals and so on.
All right, thank you very much, Tina. And sitting right off Tina is Mr. Emil G.R. Leiber. Emil.
Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing. Hello, hello. Okay. Yes, good morning, everyone. All right, so, my name is Emil Leiber, and, I'm a lawyer who are generally, we're the most popular people in a room, But, you see, so this morning and for these purposes, I will describe myself as someone specializing in business structuring and dispute resolution. All right, so, I say that I'm not necessarily there just for the fight. So, as I'm sure Kurt will say in due course and short order, that, you're there to help things to work better and more efficiently when things are going well. So that is the title that I will claim for this morning, rather than the loving popular title of lawyer.
All right, so we will adjust our mind and reposition ourselves to that that you have asked us to do, to reposition ourselves and us not call you lawyer, right? All right, so thank you very much, Emil. And sitting to the right of Emil Leiber is Mr. Daniel Catherine. and he is one of our partners here today and general manager of the Royalton Luxury Hotels, and that's where we are today. Daniel?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Daniel Casarin, and I am the general manager for Royalton Resorts in Jamaica. So first of all, I really would like to say everybody welcome home. I hope it's a nice venue, and I hope everything is running thus far good. I want to appreciate Ms. Corrados and the minister for their invitation this morning. I guess I'm here to explain a little bit about the industry in the tourism sector and the challenges that we're facing pre-post-COVID and how we are handling our day-to-day operations. I will not engage Mr. Fletcher as yet. We're good friends. I'm also a good friend with Mr. Emil, so I'm in the middle of two good friends, but this is where I'm standing right now. So thank you so much and have a good day.
Okay, thank you very much, Daniel. And the lovely lady sitting beside Daniel is none other than Mrs. Jackie Millington. Jackie, tell him what you do.
Good morning, everyone. And thanks for the warm introduction. And much like Emil, I'm a person who is not typically welcome in circles like this. I'm a miner. And I know in settings where there's tourism and tourists, people who mine are considered persona non grata. But for the purpose of this discussion, like Emil, I'll reposition and rebrand myself as a person who prepares all the aggregates that they use to build facilities like this, that prepares the sand that we can replenish our beaches with, so we don't have to thief the sand and then you have to call on Duncox and Orit to save you. And I'm a person who mines the material that we eat. And when anything that's calcium enriched, it is Jamaica's very, very pure limestone that we grind it up fine and put it in a tablet and charge you a whole heap of money and sell it to you. It's a pleasure to be here, and there are issues. Once you have grown your business to a certain extent, there's a lot to learn and a lot to share, and COVID has taught much, and we're just excited to be here to have those conversations today. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Jackie. Let's put our hands together for Jackie. And the panelists to my extreme left, Dr. Lauren Marsh. Can we ask you to introduce yourself, Dr. Marsh?
Morning, everyone. Good day. My name is Mike Check.
And somebody said he's powerful like that.
Morning, everyone. Hope you're doing well. My name is Lauren Marsh, and I'm the acting head for the Hugh Shearer Labor Studies Institute at UWI Mona Open Campus. And essentially what we do is a lot of research in labor market trends. We also tend to do training in disciplinary procedures, labor laws, and so on. And Jillian, colleagues, it's good to be here for two main reasons. First, I was born in Falmouth, Trelawney.
Now
Good?
we know.
Yeah, so welcome home, right? Secondly, I went to Duncan's All-Age School. Good? So this is familiar territory. So it's good to be here, and I hope to speak to you further as the day progresses, okay?
All right, so we have learned some more about, we have researched some more today. Right? He's normally the researcher. We are researching today. All right, thank you very much, Dr. Marsh. And we go straight into the panel discussion, but just wanting to say a couple of things. So our theme, repositioning Jamaica's labor market post-COVID. And the question might be asked, when is COVID over? Is it over? Will it ever be over? So understand in context that when we say post-COVID, we're talking about any time now and beyond, right? And we're calling this period post-COVID because since we have no defined date. When we talk about repositioning, there are a couple of words that come to mind: recalibrate, renew, refocus, rejuvenate, restore, rethink, and it suggests that we're doing new things with existing human capital and also future entrance to the labor force, to the labor market. So in order to reposition, it's an exact science if you did geography. And we must understand the lay of the land. We must take stock of our current coordinates at the organizational level, at the level of a sector, and yes, at the national level. And obviously, we're in a global community, so internationally. Then we need to become comfortable in the global space. Any organization, any country that is not comfortable in the global space is not moving forward in terms of sustainable development and growth. Prior to March 2020, prior to COVID, the world, including Jamaica and the organizations even represented here, had plotted their path to sustain growth and development. You have your strategic targets, and boom, a big explosion, and everybody was hit all at once. Micro, small, medium, large, internal, external, everybody all at once. Developing countries, developed countries. And we all had to rebuild from the same place. That in itself presents advantages. And Jamaica has always, and I've said it already today, Jamaica has always been little but with Talawa. So, as we discuss today, we have the honor of hearing from our panelists what went through their minds, because you notice they are all leaders in their organization. When this bomb hit, what went through their minds? What happened to their organizations? What did they do? What are they going to continue to do to sustain the growth and development? Because I am suggesting to you that they have grown even after the effects of the pandemic. And what is happening globally is a conversation that there is reversing of this recovery in some countries. A reversal because of things like inflation. A reversal because of things like the skills mismatch. And if you think about it, many of you are HR practitioners, many of you business leaders, many of you trade unionists. We have all seen many signs across Jamaica mark vacancy, help wanted, help needed. My colleague in the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, Mr. Lyndon Ford, will tell you it's the first time we have had more vacancies than people. Yes, I heard the murmur in the room. We need to know what is happening. There is also a phenomenon of the great resignation in some countries, that people have stepped away from an employee-employer relationship to own account work and consulting. Self-employment. We're going to be hearing from the panelists right now because their experiences are going to be very important to us. Once we hear from the panelists, you will have a chance. There will be a rotating mic, or mics, plural, so that you can weigh in, you can give your comments, you can also ask your questions. All right, and we are on a timed program, so we will go through the presentations and then go into that Q&A. But I will ask that both Mr. Wan and Mr. Fletcher are the opening bowlers in the Q&A section. So we're ready to go. So I'm going to be asking Jackie to start. And we're going to go from mining to hotel and accommodation. And from hotel and accommodation, we go to manufacturing. Then we want to know what is going to happen in entertainment. After we've done that, we're going to be asking Mr. Emil Leiber to speak from that legal counsel perspective in terms of what has he seen in terms of the challenges of Jamaican investors. What does he think needs to be done? And I'm sure we won't escape him speaking about the legislative framework. And right after he does that, Dr. Lauren Marsh is going to tell us what he has seen scientifically through research. Okay? So let's get the ball rolling.
What went through our minds? And I think Jillian is asking us to go back to, is this mic working?
Yes.
Jillian is asking us to go back to March 2020, when the whole COVID pandemic exploded on us, and the government took certain steps. And as a business leader, the biggest challenge was how to manage in the face of uncertainty. Did not know what was going to happen, did not know how it would play out. But what we decided to do was to do all we could in our power to preserve life. We recognized, we partnered with our union leadership and recognized that things may get very difficult because we saw in the initial stages revenues fall to zero. And we took a decision, the union, and I'll say this favorably, I use the wrong word, but abdicated the responsibility to us. They said, go ahead, do what you have to do, like you would to your surgeon. You come in and the doctor say you need surgery, and you say whatever you do. And the union did that for us, and I give them thanks for that. They say, do what you need to do to preserve life and limb. And what we had to do was to control costs, all costs. Labor costs being one of them, of all levels of staff, very top, and it's easier to cut at the top because there's more fat to cut, all the way down to try to maintaining a basic income for everyone. So the first thing we tried to do was to make sure to preserve life and limb, to cut costs. And then we went on, luckily for us in the mining sector, we didn't have the fallout for a very long time. People figured out that they needed to build home offices. People figured out that hotel building projects were still on the plans. So our business did not go under for a very, very protracted period. But nonetheless, what we learned from it was that we could do more with less. People became more productive because people instantly recognized that these were serious times, and we were able to, the over 60s were out of the workforce, so we had to step up the plate. The younger people had to step up their supervision. We could not effectively work from home in our sector, and so that was what we had to do. Push for productivity, push for cooperation, and to very, very carefully manage every cent that went out and do our best to get as much dollars in as possible. And that's how we have, I want to say, we have more or less made it through, not terribly damaged, and we've made it through. And I think we built up a little bit of a trust factor, because once we recognized that things were not as bad as we had originally projected, then we, at the end of the year, we gave back to our employees, because we said we made it through and everybody suffered through it. So there was a little bit of a give back there, because there was enough. And that's basically how we dealt with it.
Thank you very much, Jackie. Very interesting journey since COVID. All right, so hotel and accommodation, Daniel?
March 2020. I remember I was coming from Negril, and we were called into an extremely high-level call, and we were just told, you need to shut down in 1 week. Now, in the hotel, you have guidelines to open hotels. You have an SOP to open, you have guidelines to build, but there's nothing as to say close. None, it's non-existent. And you're not just shutting down a facility, you're shutting down, well, here we have 1,000 plus staff, and Negril is similar. So we're talking about 2,000 plus that there's also no handbook that explains you how to do it. Initially, we all thought, all right, well, let's wait. UK collapse, Canada fall next. When we heard about US, then we said, all right, it's happening. So the 7 days we were given, it turned out to be 48 hours. So we had 48 hours to shut down the hotel, both hotels, and to work out whatever we had to do. Emily is the first person that I call. Emily is the first person that I call. I said, I don't know what to do. I need help. How we do this? I don't know. So we covered the legal standpoint of the law, but then clearly you have to deal with the human side of the situation. Now a hotel, a hotel supplies a lot to the communities. We take care of schools, we take care of hospitals, we take care of police, we take care of unfortunate situations, because we have a lot of items that we give away. So one of the human aspects that we look at it, I said, hold on. We're going to close. We have food that is going to expire by next month in the warehouse. Let's just give it away. So my beautiful HR team then, along with some other managers, we are now next day in the warehouse packing rice, flour, eggs, and milk to deplete the warehouse, because anyways, it would have gone wrong. And we thought, with this, we should be okay. This is not going to be so bad. We'll go over it. It was not the case. We did get an impact. We closed the properties between 6 to 8 months. Through the closure, a lot of our staff, I would say, they got some rest. I didn't. Every day was, I think we did over 200 scenarios. Every day was an scenario to corporate office. Okay, we are going to now come into this 120 days layoff. Now what? So it's a scenario, what if we open, what if we close? Because a hotel at close is not, I don't know how's the mining factory, but a hotel close is not something that you can just close and lock and bye, see you in 6 months. A hotel is alive, a hotel needs security. We have a minimum of JPS bill to pay, we have insurances, we have equipment that we need to constantly use. We have diesel, we have pump rooms, we have pools, we have, it's a live property. So we were doing a scenarios of how much would have cost at close and how much would have cost if we open at 10%. Now, in the hotel industry, there's no staffing guide that goes below 40%. Because before COVID, we had the impression that no hotel can make money below 40%. So the minimum staffing guide would have been 40%. Now here we are doing staffing guides at 10%, something we've never done before. And not only that, how can we just break even with the 10%? So it was very challenging every single day as to what if. We live in the world of the what if. Even if the world was to open, at which point in time would it make sense for us to reopen? At which point in time we would have said, okay, staff, you can come back, but what will guarantee that next week I don't have to tell you, sorry, we have to close again, go home again? Because it will cost us an arm and a leg to do that. So then we opt after the 120 days to say, listen, whoever wants the redundancy, we're ready. Come and get it. One of the key decisions that allow us to keep staff and not opt for the redundancy is that we opt to pay you all your vacations. Whatever vacation was accumulated through the period of time you've been working here. So at least to give them something to hold on and not opt for the redundancy. Another thing that we did that I could proudly say there's only 2 hotels in the island that did this, and we were one of those, is we opt to pay a minimum wage for just to stay at home. So we say, all right, I don't want you to take your redundancy. I'm gonna pay you, I believe it was 30,000. I believe it was 30,000 a month just to stay home. Now, these work in our favor because most and some of our line staff, it's what they make. So in an essence, they were living with their salary as if they're working, but they were at home. So with that, we actually were able to retain a lot of team members. And then we reopened. We reopened at 20%, and pretty much in line with what you just said. The productivity was the word that was around. The resiliency was the word that was around. And we all learned how to do 3 and 4 jobs at once. And we were successfully able to run a hotel at 15% occupancy. Something that nobody would ever thought about it. We opened the first day at 12%. We dropped next day to 7%. And then we said, all right, let's hold. To give you an idea, at closing, full close stop, this hotel cost close to $500,000 on a monthly basis. Close, 0 income business. That's what it would cost, plus Negril. So we were not losing $500,000. We were not making a cent. We were losing close to 200, but it was better than losing $500,000. And the hotel needed to turn on the lights again and see people, and the bars need to be alive, and so forth and so on. So currently, we're in a good position. I think the hotel industry is in a very good position. Way better than what everybody would have expected, and I think that's where the shortcoming of the labor is around. Nobody expected this booming. On our sector, on the produce sector and some other industries. So that's a little bit of our COVID story. Thank you.
Wow. And I am really amazed because it is almost in the minds of hoteliers. That was like impossible. But here we are talking about what became possible. Yeah. Thank you so much, Daniel. Yeah. All right, so we'll hear from manufacturing.
Okay, in the manufacturing business, we weren't as bad as the hotel situation. I guess it's the other way around, good and then bad, because we were able to produce more goods. Our export market went up. We export a lot of goods. I guess the persons overseas were in lockdown, so they would buy more spices and sauces. We had full slate of staff and had to take on more persons, because there are persons from the hotel industry and the overseas program. We were able to hire them because we have more production, so we needed more staff. The only drawback we had was we had to increase our expenses by sanitizing. We locked down a couple times to do cleaning and all of that. But overall, we can say during the COVID, we weren't affected that much. However, now we're finding that we're not exporting as much. Persons who were on the overseas program, they left us in droves. Persons who were in the industry, hotel industry, left us. So we are now facing it in another way. Our suppliers increase our products. In the agriculture market, where we get the goods from the farmers, during COVID, we had fixed prices, so they wouldn't increase on us. But now we find out they are now asking for an increase because, you know, the fertilizer is up, the chemicals are increased. So we are now feeling it now, post-COVID.
Wow. So COVID was good for you? But post-COVID,
it's bad. Yes.
It's not so good.
Not so good.
Because now you're back to
below. We're gone back. Yes, less exports.
Ensuring that you pay high prices.
High prices.
Based on your supply chain. The persons who became available to you as workers are no longer available because other areas have reopened. That is very interesting. So let us hear from entertainment.
Well, as you know...
And before you start, I was at a function 2 nights ago, and I said, you know, I love that song, and I even loved it more during COVID. Coffee, not the coffee that we drink. Where will we go? When the quarantine thing done, and everybody touch road. Yeah. So entertainment.
Well, as you know, for entertainment, it was actually, COVID-19 was very difficult for us. And it was the one industry, as everyone knows, that remained closed until about 2 months ago. So the practitioners in our industry actually had a lot of hardship during that time. Our entertainers, our event planners, engineers.
Let me stop you. And there was no Sumfest.
Right, there was no Sumfest. There was nothing. There was nothing. What I will say is that everyone in the industry became rather resilient. Entertainers went online to keep us all engaged during that time. Unfortunately, many of them weren't able to earn from it because it's difficult to earn from online presentations for various reasons. But as we have begun to reopen now, people are starting to see those opportunities come back. As it relates to I wear another hat as well. I actually manage a young artist. And, you know, prior to COVID-19, we had a major US tour planned. We were heading out on the road that April to do something like 34, 35 dates. All of that got canceled. Unfortunately, some of those dates are just never going to come back because throughout the markets, throughout the world, we've seen where promoters have gone out of business. You know, some of the events that were staples throughout the world and here in Jamaica are not going to come back. So, you know, everyone has had to kind of try to figure out new ways to still earn from the creative industries. People like, you know, in the industry that do service providers like the main events of this world, John Swaby Entertainment, they lost some of their tech skilled labor because there was no opportunities for them, and some of those people have just not come back to the industry. And those are highly skilled labor. There's a lot of them are learned on the job. So they're having difficulty trying to replace those people. So we do need to think about training people, engineers, people in the digital, you know, digitizing, doing all of those things. People, content creation. Throughout the world, they're saying that there's a lack of content. They're behind in content creation because, you know, the Netflixes of this world, they are screaming for more content, and we need to train people to be able to create that content. So that is something that I think here in Jamaica we need to really think about, training facilities for our people in the creative industries. The other thing that I think is interesting, and I kind of touch on with tourism, for example, there's a lot of entertainers who, now that we've reopened, one of the things that the challenges we're seeing with artists is that we can't get visas right now to travel. The US Embassy is backed up for work permits up until next year. I understand, for example, like Chronix was to go off to a show last Friday and was unable to go because they could not get visas for his band to travel. And so we're going to need to think about more opportunities for our artists here in Jamaica to work and earn money. And I think, you know, I've seen in some of the hotels where there's a lot of imported entertainment, and we really need to think about maybe creating opportunities for some of our young Jamaican emerging talent to be able to entertain our visitors throughout the hotel industry. I think that's something we all need to think about as well.
Wow. That is very interesting because with the border closures, you're saying that our entertainers would have been performing locally. But a large part of what they did was to perform globally. And the border closures meant they were not moving economically, income-wise, and what you have said is also very significant, that their support is going away or has gone in some instances, the engineers, all of that kind of support that's needed. So we have to now rethink, reposition, look at the coordinates that is needed to take the entertainment industry forward, and what is going to be that balance in terms of labor supply and demand, and encouraging persons in the industry. All right, thank you very much, Tina. Let us hear another round of applause for Tina and the panelists that have spoken already. So, we're going to be inviting the gentleman that says that sometimes you're comfortable in his presence, and other times you're not comfortable in his presence. And we're going to be inviting Emil Leiber to speak from the perspective of legal counsel, supporting investment in Jamaica, Because I know that there are a lot of investors that confide in you and expect you to provide some solutions. You will speak generally, no doubt, about what happened to investors and what are some of the things that had to be done and needs to be done. Over to you, Emil.
All right, thanks very much, Gillian. I will say that March 10th, 2020 was a date I will never forget because it was my anniversary. So I remember the day that COVID was first announced in Jamaica. We all kind of had a feeling it was here long before, but it became official on my anniversary in Jamaica. Now, at that time, it was very interesting because I approached COVID from 3 different hats at the same time. I was president of the Bar Association. I, as a member of the executive committee at the time of my firm, not yet managing partner, and legal counsel. So it is an interesting feeling when others are looking to you for advice and you're also trying to figure it out at the same time. No, because one of the things that we observed in Jamaica in COVID is the gaps in our law, right? Because a significant portion of our legislation is from the 70s, right? And so when it is that hotel closures, entertainment industry, and so on, were faced with suspension of operations, Section 5A of the Employment Termination Redundancy Payments Act got flogged and beaten into the ground, right? Because the vast majority of employers didn't have a nice layoff clause in their employment contracts. Because as Daniel was saying, they don't anticipate shutting down. Layoffs is for other people, not for we, right? Well, we don't know about this layoff business. We are working and we're earning money. So a lot of the initial stages of COVID from the client standpoint, from the investor standpoint, was figuring out what to do within their structure, you know. And a lot of people think of employment law as something you only think about at 2 points: when you're hiring and when you're firing, right? But employment law, like the hotel, is live because it is always changing. Your business that you started today is not the same business 5, 10 years from now. However, your employment structure and documents might still be the same as when you're a little 2-man operation and give out little letter here and little letter there, right? And so, you know, one of the things that COVID showed us was the necessity to always keep looking at what your structure is and whether your structure works, right? And then one of the aspects of the Jamaican labor environment is because we don't have a lot of legislation that governs how employment works. What that means is that we have a lot of benefit-based legislation. Your minimum notice, your maternity leave, your vacation leave, your sick leave, your redundancy pay is. So that focuses on benefits. But that whole structure of how does the employment relationship work while it is ongoing and you're not severing and so on. And I see due process is a part. Gillian waited till we eat first and then she's going to talk about due process because you need to do that on a full belly, you know. That, you know, again deals with severance. But this whole thing about, okay, how do we operate in this context where we're suspending operations? We don't know when we're going to reopen. and with how are we maintaining our relationships and so on. And Daniel gave you what I call a textbook example of how you can do that well, you know, where you remain in communication with the workers and you continue to support the workers so that they're not in a position where they have no choice but to sever, right? But certainly, I will say that during COVID, it called upon my creativity more so than any other point in my practice, because I had to be making new things, making new documents which didn't exist before, you know, creating new structures, okay. One of the things also that I experienced during COVID was that I became one of my own best clients, right? Because I had to try how to figure out the firm. Because remember, at the end of the day, you know, your lawyers cannot do well if their clients are not, right? So your client has to do well to generate income to be able to pay you, right? Many people need a lawyer, but very few people can pay a lawyer, right? So therein lies the difficulty where you too are in a state of uncertainty about what will happen and what will happen if the government tells you close your doors. So there are some aspects of law that can be done on your bed, on your laptop, but to run your business, run your payroll, run your admin, run your accounts, and so on, not everything transitions well into a remote structure. And if you're doing property-based law, you have clerks, stamp office, titles office, and things that you can't sit down at home and do, right? And so there are a number of aspects there now where you had to think, okay, well, how will this work? You know, if it is. So while it is we weren't dealing with the corporate office, we had many, many meetings and weekly meetings. Okay, where are things now? Because this lovely DRMA, right, change minute by minute. You don't know what is going to happen when. And we too, you know, where lawyers never want to be the center of news, but we ended up in the newspaper about layoffs, you know, Don Cox layoffs, which was not entirely accurate. So even that now was, again, calling upon the creativity. We said, all right, we're going to lay off and suspend. And Gillian may disagree with this structure, but, you know, that's why we're here. Right, we're going to lay you off from your current permanent contracts of employment and rehire you to do the same duties on a variable compensation basis, right? So basically, what we did was say we rise and fall together. If the firm earns money, you will get paid anywhere from zero, if we earn $0, to 10%, 20%, 25%, 30%, 50%, because we don't know what our income is going to be if everything gets locked down. So for that period, and I'm trying to recall now why that month we did it for that. I think it was a 1 month or 2 months where we said, okay, everybody from the top down is now on a variable compensation scheme dependent on fee income. And so, thankfully, there was no point in time that we ever had to pay anybody below 100%. But we had to prepare ourselves for the possibility that we could be in that place where, as we know, for most businesses, labor cost is your largest overhead outside of JPS. You know, thankfully, nobody from JPS here, right? Yes, no. So, yes, right. So, labor costs for almost any business, right, is one of your largest overheads in doing business. And so, you had to go from an arrangement where prior to COVID, you had a fair idea of how much you earn each month. Sometimes it's up, sometimes it's down. But you know that you are, you know, going to be able to make payroll and, you know, the other things and so on. But what COVID showed is that, listen, you have to be prepared to pivot, right? And again, and I'm happy to say that it's a bit of a theme where partners down to bearers, everybody was on the same variable thing, I think the partners, we each signed each other's letters, that you're now on a variable compensation scheme and that type of thing, and so it required you to pivot. Another thing now, again, we know how much everyone loves lawyers. Court was locked. If you are an attorney doing criminal law, practicing what they call the criminal bar, representing accused persons, not go on. Dry. Because nobody was being brought to court because court closed. So you can't charge your appearance fee for your bail application and so on. So what you doing, right? And so you had to learn to pivot. When it is that the Bar Association, a lot of its income was from putting on seminars, right? Doing training seminars for lawyers, which are in-person events. I think I'm now probably one of the foremost Zoom experts in Jamaica. I had to create the Jambar Zoom platform, set it up for webinars, the add-ons, the increased cloud storage, the this, the that, and so on, to set it up for registration, go online, and now provide a product that was a face-to-face product and had been for many, many years, and now make it into a virtual product, right? When you're dealing with meetings now, which had legal requirements for physical attendance and so on, you have to say, okay, how do I legally have a virtual meeting, right? Because yes, you can always click onto your video platform of choice, but is it legal, And so, and at the same time, you're working with the Chief Justice trying to figure out virtual court, right? So that was another thing that he had regular meetings to do that, again, to try to pivot. Now, one thing I will say, certainly in terms of virtual court and even the virtual seminars for the Bar Association and so on, and even from the perspective of the law firm and client meetings, is that the takeaway from COVID is that a lot of the things that you thought you needed to drive in traffic to do, you now realize that you don't lose much, right? Once it is that you either have cameras off or ensure that you have on a shirt if the camera is on, and I've found that an unwritten rule is that women determine whether it's a camera on meeting, because a woman, if you have female members of the meeting, they tell you, I can't turn on my camera right now, as versus, a man don't really care too much how they look on camera or not. And, you have even some judges in other jurisdictions, thankfully, who will have their camera on and the shirt buttoned down to the navel. Some people are a little too comfortable with their bodies, we learned in Zoom, But certainly the takeaway is that there are a number of things that can be done efficiently using a virtual platform. And even the fact that this very presentation is now being broadcast on YouTube, so you open up your audience, you open up your scope, and then it opens up your potential base, all right? So the people who would not have been able to drive, fly, travel to participate in whatever enterprise you're doing can now at least observe. Now, again, pricing mechanism is a challenge for that as well. But again, it forces you to pivot. So again, client meetings and so on, you just can click on and click off. So if Daniel and I need to speak urgently about something, Teams, the click, 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 So as much as I enjoy driving down to Trelawney and the salubrious surroundings, you can then do it more cost effectively. By having a virtual enterprise. But I think the takeaways from COVID for multiple sectors is pivot. So we have seen here where it's up and down. You have to learn to be able to, I said, people always can adjust well to doing better, but not so much doing worse. All right? And so you have to learn to structure your business in a way to pivot. And that means having the right wording in your employment handbook. That means having the right wording in your contracts of employment. And that would also be helped by the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, having the right set of laws to underpin that whole infrastructure, so we don't have to exercise as much creativity as we currently do in order to set up those structures. And I said I won't go into section 22 at all, since that is another part of the program. But certainly the business flexibility, I think, is an essential part of employment efficiency and productivity. And what I mean by that is be able to promote quickly and readily those who are prospering and doing well, and also being able to separate in a cost-efficient and way that gives dignity for all. Right? I see Kurt isn't here, but I know he'd be. Oh yeah, okay. You just move. You just move out the line of sight. Okay, yes. So, yeah, man, Kurt. Yes, it's true. We don't want to have that limitation right in front of me. Right? So, that flexibility to be able to say, okay, those who are doing well, let them do well, let them be promoted, let them be trained, let them be upskilled, and those who are not fit for purpose, let us try and find an alternative. As I also do more work for government departments, Gillian, you also see some of the limitations within the public sector structure and creating the best efficiencies and pivoting to what looks to be inflationary future in the short term, and how best to address that, and how to do more with less. And as we know, more with less is a productivity issue. And again, what someone may say that is not part of my job description, right? And this is where the updating again comes along, where somebody's job grows organically, you need to update the job descriptions to match what they're actually doing. Because when they stop doing it, for whatever reason, right, you need to be able to say you're not performing. And when you say that you're not performing, you need to be able to tie it into something, right? Based on what? Where is it written that I'm supposed to be managing the swimming pool? I was hired to manage the kitchen, and show me where it says I need to do that. And so those are the types of things that you always have to have what I call be aware of and have on the front burner, because I'll tell you many, many times people come to me and say, I want to get rid of that person. I said, show me the file. All right? And that is always a conversation that you have, and you have to have, if it is that you want to take any steps. And just to say that take steps doesn't necessarily mean exit. It could mean performance plan, a properly structured performance plan, and their performance may improve, right? And so it also means creating an infrastructure where that performance can grow and develop. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that. And it's good to see that even the legal counsel needed counsel as well.
Yes.
Quite interesting, because from the ministry's perspective, I know that we came under a lot of fire, that we had archaic legislation, laws that really did not respond to the normal condition, much less the abnormal condition. And I would also add that as a Ministry of Labor, we also had to revisit how we would be delivering our service. For instance, later you'll hear about the Labor Market Information System, the ELE, and we had to still be trying to find employment at a time that people were being laid off. What we did was to try to say, okay, you might have this particular skill, but what else can you do? How can we reintroduce you to the labor market? What can we do to keep you earning? And we had some of those very difficult conversations with job seekers. We had to remain open for persons who were laid off, although we were also physically constrained by having to close some of our offices. And we recognized technology helped us as well, because for the very first time you were able to reach us, and still are able to reach us by WhatsApp, using more of our digital technology. We were able to have these kind of conferences by webinars, and we found that it worked so well that now we were having our international partners join us online as well. So even as a Ministry of Labor, we had to rethink it. We had to rethink what are we doing with our staff as well. You know, how do you handle extended absence from work due to COVID illness, and also periods of even travel-related quarantine? Many of those conversations. So all of us are saying that there was a problem, and I like the word you use, Emile. Pivot has become such a buzzword, because it means that you have to stand your ground, but you have to shift in a way that you don't fall down, and that you can continue to rise. All right, so having said that, I'm going to invite Dr. Lauren Marsh to just tell us, what are the workers saying? What have they said?
Yeah.
Because all of us saying all these
Yes.
beautiful things, but let us hear the voice of the worker.
All right, thank you very much, Jillian. Emile, very good presentation. But Mr. Gillespie, I want to commend you on the wage floor you mentioned that you implemented for your team members or staff at the hotel. Very good. The fact is, colleagues, that based on my observation and research, and I will make reference to a study we did entitled The Impact of COVID-19 on Jamaican Workers. For a powerful study we did with the Ministry of Labor. Jillian, thank you again for the support. What we're realizing, colleagues, is that we are hearing talk and seeing action of organizations as a result of COVID-19 tending to making positions redundant or laying off workers. The issue I'm observing for a particular period is that none of this particular approach or action is guided by any kind of empirical data or due process. And let me expound on that. I've had colleagues who will approach me and say, Lauren, we need to lay off some persons, or we need to make positions redundant in the organization. I say that's understandable, but where's the rationale? What are you going to use as your benchmark to say you're going to make these positions redundant? And in many cases, nothing comes to the fore. That's going to create an issue going forward, because in many situations, you'll find where the employee will believe that it is either discrimination in some cases, especially if that particular individual doesn't have a good relationship with management. Good? If you intend to lay off as well, you need to ensure that you rationalize the process. More so, I am seeing more and more, because we're still in a pandemic where persons are on probation, and there is a fallacy that because we're in a pandemic and persons, possibly the companies in financial challenges, you're experiencing that, you can simply send a person home. That's not the case. I'm also saying to you that if you intend to sever the employment relationship during the probationary period, you also have to rationalize that particular approach that you intend to take. Good? Going as well, also linked to what I'm saying is the whole matter of due process. Again, the pandemic caused a lot of hysterical behavior from my colleagues in both the public and private sector, more so the private sector. And what they will want to do at times is to essentially ignore some of what Mr. Leiber spoke about when he mentioned due process. They want to simply ignore the disciplinary hearing process. They want to send the person home immediately. I'm saying to you, if you do that again, there will be a violation of established labor laws. You still have to go through the process. Good? And the fact is, much of the difficulties experienced by many companies can be relaxed if you do one thing: communicate effectively. Good? So I'm saying to you, the company is going through hardships. It's understandable. We're in a pandemic. Historically, there is an antagonistic relationship between employers and workers and worker reps, like my good friend Kurt here. And historically, I don't know if you're like that anymore, Kurt. Right. I'm saying to my colleagues in both sectors that what you need to do essentially is communicate with workers. And I tell you why. In the research I mentioned just now, the impact of COVID-19 on Jamaican workers, I asked a question to the employees or participants, and we sampled over 1,000 persons. And we asked them simply if they believe that the hardships experienced by employers today, if they're real. And 80% said yes, they understood and they do acknowledge the hardships. But what doesn't happen is the communication. The communication happens at the higher level amongst management, but it doesn't trickle down. And that is where the chaos occurs. So there has to be communication, two-way communication, and it flows where at one angle or one instant you have management giving directives, which is your duty as management, but more so your directives are sometimes or oftentimes influenced or guided by the perspectives of employees or your team members. And I will say to you, colleagues, that for the HR practitioners here, kindly know that in many situations, you don't have the answers, but your line staff or your employees do. Good? But because you fail to consult them, you end up making the wrong decisions. All right? That's pretty much it for me, basically, Gillian. I mean, we can speak more on this. All right?
Thank you very much, Dr. Marsh. Let's just have a hand for Dr. Marsh as well. So, the World Bank has said that there's evidence of economic backsliding. So too, the United Nations, the UN, is saying that global job market recovery has gone into reverse. I am not certain, and I know that places like the Planning Institute of Jamaica, the Statistical Institute of Jamaica, and other research arms will be looking at this in Jamaica. But I want to hear from our panelists before we open mic to Mr. Wan, Mr. Fletcher, and we'll have a few others from the floor. What is that one thing that needs to be done in your respective industry? I'll give you two if I must. To ensure that the gains in terms of labor market recovery in Jamaica is not reversed. Jackie.
One thing I think we need to push very heavily is a productivity-based pay. We used to have, or we're accustomed to being paid an hourly rate. Even if the lawyers do it, they just get paid a very, very big hourly rate. But we habitually pay an hourly rate, or at the very best, a monthly rate. No matter what you do, you're going to get your pay. And one thing I really want us to move towards is a properly defined performance incentive payment, where based on KPIs, performance indicators, you get paid. I turn up at work every day, maybe don't do a thing. At the end of the month, money in my account. And the KPIs don't matter. And we see during the pandemic, we saw how much more we demanded of people and people responded. Whether it was a whole fight or flight thing and adrenaline kicked in and people were doing more than one job. What we're looking at right now is people are starting to say, well, COVID done, and the lethargy has come back. And one thing I think we need to do to kind of catch it from it rolling back and for us to move forward is to really sit down, not as a one company, but as a collective group and say, how can we pay for performance? That's my one thing.
Thank you very much. And I am aware that the chairman of the Minimum Wage Commission is listening to you. So he's online, overseas, and he's listening to some of those comments. Thank you very much, Jackie. Daniel.
I would say it's two things, if we need to narrow it down. In the private sector, at least in the industry that we work, I cannot change the fact of what the market will be in terms of labor out there. For many reasons, because investment has not stopped in Jamaica. Now, we talk about Princess Hotels coming into Negril with 2,000 rooms. We're talking about Hard Rock to be built next to Iberostar, 1,800 rooms. We're talking about ourselves developing Planet Hollywood next to White Sands, where we are. That's 1,000 rooms. Rio is coming next to Blue Waters, 752 rooms. There's no labor. But I cannot change that. What I can change, and I try to do this daily with my HR team that is here, is at least try to have the staff as comfortable as possible at work. And with this, I mean, I have line staff that, for example, I know they come 3-4 hours before their work starts to have breakfast. And then at their work, to have lunch. Because most likely there's no other food until next day. Now, I can't tell them don't. I should tell them, you know, your duty is not started as yet, but I can't. So that's one thing we do. Another thing we do is the outreach programs out there to the community, because I do believe that a salary increase, and this is something I discuss with my corporate office, a salary increase usually is 8-10%, right? If you're making a minimum wage and I give you 10%, does it really make a difference? You can't buy nothing with that. That's the reality. And it's something I try to explain my team members. I say, listen, I have also guidelines, because we're a private sector, right? But I'm also, for you to really make a difference in your living, I probably have to raise you 300%. So you can actually now go to a supermarket and buy things, and not buy from the back road of your house the day-to-day with just cash. That's true. So what we do is we try to keep them as comfortable as possible. With the community, we try to also take care of them. As I said, the hotel, it's an industry that month to month we can provide assistance to whoever requires. From linen that might have a little hole, but the entire sheet is fine, we give it away. Linen, bed, mattresses, products due to expire, food, paint, labor, you call it, we can do it. I believe that where the hotel is positioned, if the community that supplies somehow most of the labor to that property, it's okay, really and truly your workers will not seek other ways of employment. Because at least nobody works 8 hours in a hotel. We're not a bank. We don't shut down. Nobody works. But at least if those 10, 12 hours you're here, you can be comfortable. It might be a better environment than actually at home. So they're fine. And I think that's something that most industries should try to do, because the reality is the labor out there right there. There's none. I did a job fair 3 weeks, 4 weeks ago. I was hiring on the spot. Can you work? Sure. What can you do? I can make eggs, cook, one time. But now I have a challenge, because I might hire you today on the spot, but you need a police record. And you might not get a police record until next month and a half. Or you might have a police record, but then to work in kitchen or anything that touches food, you need a food handler's permit. It might take another month and a half. Or you might have police record and food handlers, but now you need a bank account. And you currently cannot walk into NCB or Scotiabank and say, I would like to open an account. You need an appointment. So again, it trickles down to say, there might be some people that actually wants to work, might not be skilled, but they have the willing to do it. But we are facing those obstacles through government, and there's not much we can do about it. So that's where I would put my 2 cents.
Thank you very much. And it is very important, as we encourage employment, to remove or reduce those barriers to employment that you spoke about. And a community that is supported by an organization will yield good support from its workers and commitment. So thank you very much for those. And I recognize also that even in your industry, you have had a challenge finding workers. All right, so just going through, I think I'm down to one thing that you can do in your particular area to ensure that there's no reversal of the recovery. Emile.
Well, all right. It's hard to pin a lawyer down to one, but you know, I'll say.
And you know why I looked at you that way?
I know.
Because lawyers are normally long-winded.
I know.
But Emile is not.
I'm working on it. You know, it's a vice. I'll say communicate and apply your policies, because this is one of the things that occurred to me when Jackie spoke. One of the hardest things to do is to get managers to regularly assess, right? So it's one thing to have performance-based pay, but to get the managers and supervisors to conduct the assessments, and truthful assessments, not path of least resistance assessments, is one of the hardest things that I've seen. And I'm even speaking internally as well as externally, all right? And so I would say communicate, have worker buy-in, and even again internally have social activities. You know, work does not need to be a place where all you're doing is working towards the common objective, but also building connections that makes you less likely to want to leave. I'll end it there.
All right, thank you, Emile. Tina.
I think I touched on it earlier. I'd like to see some greater protection for our Jamaican entertainers within our market here. Like I said, we see where in a lot of the hotels they're imported entertainers, and we have a wide range of entertainers here who are not getting the opportunities. I want to see greater training for the technical people involved in the entertainment industry, so that it opens the opportunities up to our young people more. And at the edge, in encouraging our high school students to look at the creative industries as opportunities for employment. And I think, there might be some, touching on what Mr. Wan spoke about in his introduction, where he spoke to, the gap with school leaving, the low level of pass rate. Perhaps we need to, and it might be a bit of a radical view, but we perhaps really do need to look at our education system. Is the CXC system that we have really preparing our young people for the labor market? Graduating with a CXC in geography and history, is that preparing you for the jobs that are out there in the market?
Wow, what a powerful note to end that entertainment comment. I mean, is it that our reliance on certification from the external bodies as we know it really providing those needed critical skill sets for employment? Are the students really making the conversion quickly into the workplace? Very, very thought-provoking. All right, so we are going to be hearing from manufacturing that one thing that will ensure, well, you're saying that there has been a little reversal.
Yes.
You're the only one that has said so.
Yes.
But as Jackie said, we have to catch it.
Right.
When you're going to change a car tire, sometimes if it's on a grade, you have to just catch the tire, the car, so that they don't roll back. So we don't want to roll back any further. So what do you have to say to us?
Okay, the fact that we are a community-based organization, right? We tend to play emphasis, especially to the basic school, because we contribute to the basic school so that the people in the community can have their school nearby to send their children. We sort of invest in the farmers, invest in in whatever they're doing, whatever products they're planting. We sort of invest, like provide some land and all of that, so that we can really have a partnership in the community.
Okay, so you have been investing in helping their supply chain to be resilient.
Right.
All right, very good. Okay. Dr. Marsh.
Thank you, Gillian. All right, I'm going to just be frank about your question. The truth is, Jamaica has very intelligent people, and some are here now. I'm seeing one, Michaelan, let me say hi as well. We have educated people, but the fact is, it doesn't matter how many qualifications you have or how many policies we write from my position or from LIBOR's. If we don't have a cultural change, nothing will work. And if it does work, it's going to be temporary, really. So there has to be a shift in what we call the collective conscience, really. We have to have a common notion of nationhood and where we need to go. And if you look at the information which is online and available to us all, the nations that succeed and strive are those which there is a collectiveness in terms of where they need to go as a people. As Jamaicans, we're all over the place. We don't even know ourselves at times. We're misguided and we're lost. So the fact is, our leaders now need to guide us in the right direction, and that requires a cultural change, not a PhD or a master's. There has to be some collectivity in our thought processes.
Thank you very much. Very powerful way to end. Let us have a hand for all the panelists. Collectively, collectiveness. And I'm happy that that is the point on which we ended. So, Mr. Wan, You have one response to the panel. Microphone, please.
Thank you, Madam Master of Ceremonies. I only have one question.
You have one response. Very short response.
No, I thought you wanted to ask questions of the panelists. No?
You can ask one question, but we are aware that the National Minimum Wage Commission wants to weigh into what we're doing right now. So go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, I just have one question for the panelists. In terms of resilience of your organization, in preparation for whatever else other pandemics may or may not come, what strategies have you employed, particularly to do with human resources, to make you more resilient? For example, have you doing more cross-training of employees? Are you outsourcing some of the functions that you have? So if you, in the hotel, for example, if you had the swimming pool, outsourced to an outside company, or landscaping, I'm interested in hearing what you're doing to become more resilient for the next pandemic, if it comes.
All right, big question. And it has been that bowler has bowled to you, Daniel.
I hope there's no other pandemic. I don't foresee it, but I don't think the pandemic is fully over. I think that's the first thing we need to realize. It's the COVID name is still around. Now it might be called monkeypox. Yeah. I think we have learned from our history. One thing that we're doing right now is a massive cross-training, as you rightfully said. We have learned that an individual, and we learned this when we were doing some of the redundancy processes. We have a lot of staff that their position disappeared, but they could do something else. We have learned that currently creativity has placed a big factor into the day-to-day operations. We're not a company that outsources a lot of our day-to-day operations. We own the land, we own the property. We don't do that type of management things. But I guess if there was to be another pandemic, we should be ready. We should be ready, we should be prepared. At least we should know when that red flag to say, it's time, the crisis mode will now be a proactive engagement, more than I don't know what to do. From suppliers, I mean, when we closed, it was so bad that our bank accounts, the money was taken back to Canada. Canada, our main headquarters, it's in Canada. So at a point in time, Canada said, I don't know if Jamaican banks will collapse. So all of our funds were gone. We couldn't pay suppliers. We had to have a sit down with suppliers and say, I owe you money, right? Right, Emil? I owe you, but I have no cash. So I believe all of those strategic steps, we should be ready. We should know that NCB will not collapse. We should know that we can engage our partners as to say, we've been through this and we succeed. So let's go back to the drawing board. We should be okay. Our team members are confident, and at least I could say that Royalton, speaking on the hospital industry, I'm proudly to say that at least this company has very good lungs. We just don't have hotels. We have airline in Canada. We have Nexus here. It's a company that just don't have the structure. We have vertical integrated company, so we should be okay. We're good. I just hope we don't reach that stage, but we should be okay.
All right, so that reassurance you, Mr. One. Mr. Fletcher, do you have any comment, question for the panel? And I know that there will be a circulating mic. If you want to say something, just stick your hand up. We can take probably 2 or 3.
Good afternoon now. I, for a while, thought that Mr. One was looking in my notes, because one of the questions that I really wanted to ask is, how prepared are we going forward if there were to be another situation? But I broaden it to say, what protections have we built into our systems to prevent the brain drain from our own establishment? Because what we found is that where, for example, the trade unions were able to enter into partnerships, as Jackie spoke, with their employers, there was a lot less fallout in terms of loss of income, because there were very creative ways that were used to maintain a livelihood going forward. I want to know that whether within your own structures now, if you have built in some of those some of those things, protection issues or standard operating procedures that would guide you going forward. Because what we've also noticed, and Mr. Kazarin spoke about it, in terms of a lot of people would have left the industry, and separated apart from cross-training, people built up a sort of resentment towards some companies who laid them off for 120 or in excess of 120 days without even an income. And therefore, when it was time for them to be recalled, they would have found whatever alternatives during that period to supplement themselves, and as a result, they chose not to return. It is important in getting your workforce to be, in having your workforce buy into continuing with you as a partnership, that we create some of these things. And I want to know if you have and what you have done.
All right. So you called Jackie name, so obviously she's going to say something. And I'm going to find out if any of the other 2 ladies would want to say something.
We've lost a lot of sleep trying to answer those questions. And what we have come up with is the best thing we can do is to control our costs. And in our line of business, and I think everybody in Jamaica feels it, fuel and electricity are the costs that really are our biggies. And what we have done is try to have a look at those costs and come up with strategies. And we're implementing them literally as we speak so that we can cut costs. Because once you cut those costs that are just standard regardless, then you can move forward. The next step, having cut those costs, or as we work towards cutting those costs, and just to mention how we develop the systems, we have what you call borrowing a Japanese term, we developed strategy A3s. We know what our corporate vision is, and we sit down, or we are sitting down, I should use that present continuous tense, sitting down to determine how we can come up with strategies to reduce those costs. Once we have come up with them, or as we come up with them, we're trying to implement them. And then the next step is to make sure that our staff buys in, is tooled up with the right attitudes and training to make sure that they can perform at that level. And that's one of the challenges that we're facing right now. It's been mentioned, and I know CXC may not be the best measure of a person's performance, but what we have found is when people come to us and can't pass nothing, yes, we may be able to train them to operate a front-end loader, but they can't do the next step. They can't look at a code and report back to you and say, I see a code come up on your loader. It means something is about to happen. They can only mechanically operate it. So that's something else that we're looking towards. We're going to have to upskill to make sure that we have people with some measure of trainability. And for right now, having even one CXC is an indicator, because I can take that basic and build on it. But the person who has been through 11 years of school and has not been able to turn even one subject, whether it's home economics, nothing at all, I have been unsuccessful in getting those persons to go to the next level with me.
Okay. All right. So are we satisfied that Jackie has given a group response? I am seeing Dr. Marsh wanting to say something. Then we'll go to the floor. We have the first person from the floor. You'll say your name, your organization. We'll go to Mr. Robinson, and he is from the National Commercial Bank, and he is representing National Commercial Bank, one of our sponsors today. We also have in our audience, at this time, I'll acknowledge another partner, the Jamaica Public Service Company, and we have the JPS team here. All right, JPS. And I noticed they call the JPS and NCB quite often today. Royalton is a sponsor as well. And we have the Jamaica National Building Society as well. And after we take NCB's question, we will go to SEPRAD, Dr. Patrick Sterling. That order.
Right, so David, I want to go back to your question and also to Kurt's question as well. But in terms of the forecasting you're talking about, David, as I mentioned earlier, it shouldn't happen at the local level initially, right? There has to be some kind of collective discussion at the higher level first, possibly, about a path forward in case there's a pandemic. And then at the local level, whatever is suggested may be applied to each company. So in all fairness, I believe that to ask each particular participant, what are they doing? I think we should ask generally, what are we doing collectively, right? And then we deal with it at the individual level based on what is recommended, right? So that's my response to what you're saying.
Okay, so what Dr. Marsh is saying is that it's not what will you do, but what will we do. All right, so at this time, I'm going to ask for a question from the floor. Introduce yourself, please.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Conrad Robinson. I'm wearing two hats here today. I am the regional manager for JAMPRO, as well as a member of the board of the Global Services Association of Jamaica, BPO. Again, I want to commend the Ministry of Labor for considering Western Jamaica, and a little bit disappointed that the BPO sector is not better represented in this forum, given the fact that Western Jamaica is the home of the BPO sector and one of the only sector that remained open during the COVID pandemic. We've demonstrated that as a sector, and more importantly, as local leaders, we were able to come up with policy positions. We contributed significantly to the development of the DRMA, and we were able to pivot. We were resilient, and of course, you know, the agility with which we operated during the COVID pandemic has now led us to a point where, before the pandemic, we were 45,000 employees. Now we are 55,000 employees. And I think that the sector should be commended for that. So I hope in the next iteration of this event, I hear that you're planning to do one in Kingston as well, that you remember to have the BPO sector represented on the panel.
I am so happy that you have said it in this way, because this ministry has done more work with the global services sector during the pandemic than it did with any other sector.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And your Gloria Henry,
yes,
is a household name within the Ministry of
Absolutely.
Labor and Social Security.
Absolutely.
And even with the IDB, we were on with Yoni Espin, speaking about exactly what you spoke about, which is expansion. And if you look around the room, you're going to recognize that lots of your colleagues are here with us.
I heard them clapping me.
You heard them clapping you.
Yes. So
So
the second point.
Western Jamaica is the home of the BPO, and they have shown resilience, even as part of our extended Workers' Week celebrations. We gave a special recognition 2 days ago to the sector, as well as the Hotel and Tourist Association. So this ministry is so happy that youth employment was supported and continues to be supported by the global services sector. I see my colleague Lyndon Ford nodding, because that was one of the first sectors that came along with us when we said we wanted to have the continuous employment during the pandemic. We couldn't go out to have the job fairs physically, but we had the job fairs virtually. And even to date, we continue to have them. So we want to thank you all from the BPO global services sector, otherwise called nearshoring, because I think Jamaica is becoming the hub of nearshoring.
Absolutely. So real quick, and I thank you for that. So the second hat is the fact that I represent JAMPRO as well. And as you well know, JAMPRO is a government agency that has responsibility for investments and so on. So Daniel, you and I will talk. But the point I want to make, that investments never stopped. And people are continue to invest in Jamaica. But we do have a critical problem with the labor pool, right? And that has to be addressed. And I noticed Mr. Wan mentioned the fact that we have about 700,000 people who are outside of the formal labor pool. And I think the Ministry of Labor, one of your to-do is going to be to find out what is it that these 700,000 people are doing. Why is it that they are outside of the labor pool? And the next thing that we need to do in order to prevent the great resignation or the slide in terms of labor and so on is to ensure that we have fit for purpose a labor pool. Yeah? A fit for purpose labor pool. We have many sectors that has emerged as a result of the COVID pandemic. And I think that one of the things that our training institutions need to do, and certainly Ministry of Labor in terms of, probably policy and so on, is to figure out what it is that we need now in terms of labor, what it is that we will need 5, 10 years down the road, and begin to make preparation for those industries and sectors that will be coming up. So in my parting shot to the Ministry of Labor, your next session, please ensure that the BPO sector is represented and that you have a representative from JAMPRO as well as at that forum. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And your wish is our command. And we will definitely be hearing from your sector as we travel through Jamaica. This is the first in a series of regional road shows. It's not a regular road show where we're out in the street, but it is going to be in a similar kind of format. So in terms of fit for purpose employment, we recognize that as a ministry, we have to work with training agencies as well. As we identify the training gaps, we have to partner to ensure that these gaps are filled and that people are available for work and are suitably qualified. All right, so thank you very much. The second question, do you want to come closer to us, Dr. Robinson?
Sorry.
Mr. Robinson.
Good afternoon, everybody. Dr. Dayton Robinson. I'm from the Victoria Mutual Group, not NCB.
My sincerest apology.
Yes, that's
Victoria
right.
Mutual Group.
Yes, and I'm also the newest member to the National Minimum Wage Commission. So I want to pick on Emil a little bit. It's a quick one for you, Emil. So the pandemic has definitely, in my opinion anyway, redefined the definition for work and workplace. And I'm of the view that as the world focuses, as businesses focus more on results rather than activities, you don't need to be seeing somebody to know that they're working, right? That the hybrid model may be around for a while and probably will be here to stay. My question for you is, businesses have the responsibility to create a safe place of work for its team members. What are the implications for employers for those occupational hazards at home, right? As the home become now a workplace.
Well, thank you for that question.
We'll get some free consultancy right now. From
quite.
Don Cox.
Well, I can tell you, one way in which the ministry simplifies our life is by having no legislation governing that. The occupational safety and health legislation is what likely would have covered that type of scenario. But in the absence of the enactment of such legislation, it's likely to be covered by what they call common law. All right? So there is a general duty of an employer at common law to have a safe system of work. But that safe system of work or that responsibility is governed by the ability to control it. All right? So usually you have to have a safe workplace, no water on the floor, no holes in the ground where people can break their leg and slip and fall and so on. It needs to be, if you're climbing, you have to have safety equipment, gear, grab handles, that type of thing. If an employee is working from home, then the employer has no control over the home space. And in fact, many employees may not want the employer to even visit their home, much less control it, And so that has yet to be tested in the Jamaican labor law. I know that there is a European decision about the whole workplace extending to the home, right? And that an employer has responsibility. But the thing with law and decisions, the European civil law and Jamaican common law is a bit different. So when you look at or read a decision, and now we're global, so we read about things happening all over the world, but every legal environment is different. And a lot of European law has to do with a lot of European conventions and a lot of their human rights conventions and a lot of, underpinning that we don't have in Jamaica, all right? So I would say that based on where the law stands in Jamaica now, it is unlikely that a court will find that an employer's duty regarding system of work is likely to extend to a home. It is because, fundamentally it's difficult to hold somebody responsible for something, again, they have no control over. For them to have responsibility for it, there would need to be an inspection process where they will come, they will say, okay, you have to have certain requirements. They are now supplying things for your home that you then would have the duty to safeguard because these are now the employer's items that you are utilizing. They'd have to be able to come to your house to take it back if your employment ceases And so there's a number of different things at play. You have the constitutional right to privacy. You know, the privacy rights where I don't have an obligation to have allow my employer to come into my home, right? And all of those things. I know for a fact that government has stayed away from any such type of responsibility and scenario. But so I will say that the answer is no. We're not likely to have, a court is not likely to find such obligation unless and until we pass legislation that extends the scope to cover something like that.
Okay, thank you. And our final question before we bring the curtains down on this part of the presentation segment will be from Dr. Patrick Sterling. Dr. Patrick Sterling?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, panel. Very, very good presentation. And let me tell the audience, I was schooled at Falmouth All Age School. So I lived in Chulon for a while. So I was schooled at Falmouth All Age, and it's still my parish. Yes, this is more of a comment, a brief comment, than a question. I haven't heard the topic on flexi-time at all. But we find, in our experience at Seprod, we didn't lay off anybody at all. And I like the approach that Royalton took. We didn't lay off anybody. We assured everyone that your job is safe, notwithstanding pandemic. And in the midst of that, we had our own catastrophe that we had to deal with, but we kept everyone employed because we had to feed the nation. We supply food. And we had to partner with the Ministry of Labor as well to support communities. So we supply food. But what we found interesting as a learning in that whole period, and we're still involved, we had to be engaging with our trade unions. In my organization, we have 3 trade unions, 3 very strident trade unions representing employees. And we found it was a very opportune time to engage the trade unions in discussion about what's happening, what's going to happen, and how do we sustain any effort now to continue that. And we found that Mr. Kurt is here, and the NWA is our partner. We had to engage, and we have learned a lot from them. They have given us ideas, we have worked on that, and so forth. But the other thing we learned from that is how best to engage on 2014 legislation on flexi work arrangement. And Mr. Leiber, thank you very much for your engagement on that one as well. In just discussing and engaging the union in implementing, we found that we had to fast track flexi work arrangement as a corollary to keeping people employed. So we're saying we keep you employed, but we have to extend some hours. Some days we have to work this way so that we can keep you employed. And that for us worked well, particularly layering the foundation with the union in making it work. I haven't heard it said by the panel, but I think it's going to come up later. We should not leave here today without looking at how we leverage flexi work arrangement in a time like this, as we engage and consult and discuss with the trade unions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Patrick. And as I might have been indicating, this conversation is one that can't done. You know, so we draw a long bench today, because when you draw a long bench, it's a long conversation. And we have to cut it short for today, but we will have to continue this discussion at a national level. And I would just want to thank all the panelists. Please put your hand together for them. They have brought home the essence of what the theme for Workers' Week this year is, and the theme, repositioning Jamaica's labor market post-COVID. And this is the pivotal point for all entities, all industries. At this time, we're going to be moving into hear from the chairman of the National Minimum Wage Commission, Dr. Robinson, Ronald Robinson, is he on? Dr. Robinson? Is his audio on?
Hello?
Yes, we're hearing you, sir.
Okay, great.
And he is not local, he's global.
Thank you very much. Are you ready for me?
Yes, you may go ahead.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. First, let me just thank you all for having the National Minimum Wage Commission. Thank you very much. May I greet all the officials from the ministry, the hardworking personnel, and certainly our hardworking secretariat led by Ms. Barrett from the Ministry of Labor. Thank you very much for accommodating us today. For our distinguished guests and panelists and all of those that are attendees, it's certainly my distinguished pleasure, my pleasure to address you today. We do have the other two members of the commission that are here. We have St. Patrice Ennis, who is also on remotely, and he represents the Jamaica Confederation of Trade Unions. And we also have, as you would have heard earlier, Dr. Dayton Robinson, who is the newest member of the commission. I want to say that we did this type of consultation, not necessarily remotely, but we certainly were in Western Jamaica, probably 3 years ago, actually. And, you know, we found that that was an extremely informative visit. And then we had no COVID, but certainly we were able to do it in person. But you know, anything around minimum wage also drives, you know, a very lively discussion and all of that. I will say that we look forward to what we'll be doing here today. Is I won't be talking long because God knows, you know, I know you've been sitting down as an audience long enough, and certainly we'd love to hear from you in terms of your opinions and your thoughts on the national minimum wage. As you are aware, let me just give you a quick background of the minimum wage. We are a tripartite commission, led by myself as a chairperson, who is the independent individual. We also have another representative from the Jamaica Confederation of Trade Unions, and we also have somebody from the Jamaica Employers Federation. And so it's a tripartite, and essentially it is having the opinions and the thoughts of the workers and the masses meeting up with the persons who employ. And normally we do that through a series of consultations, series of presentations by individuals, submissions written, and physical presentations. And on our deliberations, you know, normally take place over the course of a year. And then a report is written and submitted to the minister for their for his or her, and in this case, his consideration. So that you know, we are an advisory commission, and so that is what we do. And so our recommendations are not necessarily, well, they might not necessarily be implemented, but certainly we would seek to give the best advice based on our consultations. As you are aware, we would have granted, and we would hope that, because there was a lot of discussion around, there was an increase in the national minimum wage this year. Of course, the report, which was submitted in February of 2020, was really at the beginning of COVID. And of course, it was a time of great uncertainty, and the country was almost into lockdown and all of those other issues. And understandably, the minimum wage could not be considered over those period, that period of time, because of the uncertainty, etc. The government now, in their wisdom, however, sought to act, and they did that this year in terms of acting on the report. I will tell you that all of our recommendations were accepted in full. And those recommendations were unanimous with regards to the Employers Federation and the trade unions. Probably one of the few times where we get the two parties really thinking and being on the same page. And that increase that was given this year is the single largest increase that the minimum wage commission has given in certainly half a century, probably closer to 50 years or somewhere in that zone, and of 28%. But even with that large increase, there was, you know, a lot of discussion and a lot of debate around it. so that you know as an audience, for those of you who are students of the game and students who are persons who follow the minimum wage, this is an extremely complex process, and one that tends to work itself through the system. And so it's not something that one can be flippant about, etc. And, you know, it has far-reaching um, effects on both macro and micro economic policies. Many of you in the audience are, in fact, employers of some kind, even at your own home. Some of you employ helpers, gardeners, etc. And believe it or not, the national minimum wage also has an effect on that. We are, in fact, this is the first of some of the consultations that we'll be having. We are taking part here. Ms. Barrett will be going through and handing out some questionnaires. A very simple, I think, 7 questions, just to get your opinions. And they're just very simple yes/no answers. And we'd love for you to, at that point, just sort of indicate your thoughts where that is concerned. And then we will invite questions from you and, in fact, your thoughts on the national minimum wage. So we will be having our consultations this year, and we are also we have decided as a commission that we will be every quarter be doing, be receiving presentation from special special interest groups. One of the things that has sort of, dominated the discussions over the last several months has been the issue of the issue of the livable wage. Just so that you know, we are in deliberations and discussions about this establishment of a special committee of experts to look at that and to look at how it would impact Jamaica, and even to give their recommendations on that particular process. It's not a very simple one, but Jamaica is not unique where that is concerned, as many countries are, having that debate now. And so I think it is also fitting for Jamaica to be having these discussions at this time. So I just thank you very much, Jillian, for the opportunity to address the gathering. And I will, whilst we're handing out these questionnaires, I will ask the other 2 commissioners just to bring greetings from their respective organizations and to give you their perspective. And then we could just easily move into if there are any questions or any thoughts that they may want to give us. We're here to listen more than to talk, really, and to get your thoughts. And so I have my notebook right beside me, so I'm just prepared to do it. So if I'm allowed, Madam Chairperson, I could introduce the next speaker, and we'll just ask St. Patrice Ennis from the Jamaica Confederation of Trade Union to introduce himself and to give his perspective on, his role and his thoughts so far. St. Patrice, thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair, and good afternoon, everybody there who is in attendance. Thank you very much, Dr. Robinson. I am St. Patrice Ennis, General Secretary of the Union of Technical, Administrative, and Supervisory Personnel, and also a member, Vice President of the Jamaica Confederation of Trade Unions, and that is the body which I represent at this moment. I think Dr. Robinson have said it all. Just to just emphasize 1 or 2 points. That as a commission, we are to consider and advise the minister on all matters relating to the national minimum wage, all matters. So that is what we, over the years, have not paid attention to the other aspects of our mandate. I think it is the charge of the chairman that during this, our term, serving as an advisory body, we will look and try to, as best as possible, to serve all that is required by our mandate. And that is to obtain and record information in relation to the minimum wage, and to also consider the terms and conditions of employment and all other factors affecting the circumstances of employment and remuneration of the minimum wage. categories of workers. As you are aware, we are not just dealing with one category. The minister has in his remit to designate whichever category of worker that he want to put under the purview of minimum wage. And we have, apart from the general minimum wage, we also consider the minimum wage of security guards and other factors that relate to the security guards in terms of remuneration and other conditions of employment where they are concerned. So in the questionnaire and in our conversation, we will also be inviting people to pronounce on that category with respect to what they deem necessary or what they deem appropriate for that category of workers, because that is also within our remit. So just to be on the safe side, I note very carefully that my chairman wasn't long and I wouldn't like to go beyond his time. So I will pause until there's another opportunity to say something else. So back to you, Chair.
Thank you very much, St. Patrice. At this time, I'll ask the commissioner that is in attendance in person, Dr. Dayton Robinson, so that we're not related, but we do serve on the same time. Dr. Dayton Robinson, for him to bring some comments on behalf of the Jamaica Employees Federation. Dayton.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. Not a lot to add to what you and St. Pat have said, seeing that we have always had consensus on what we need to do as a minimum wage commission. But I just want to add just one thing to that from an employer standpoint, as we seek to look at what the minimum wage ought to be going forward, that there has to be, some more focus on labor productivity, as well as not just labor productivity, but organizations' ability to pay, because I think that's there you have this cycle. As the organization's ability to pay, as productivity increase and organization's ability to pay increase, then the likelihood of us, pushing minimum wage even higher is even more possible. So that is something that we definitely, I believe, have to focus a little bit more on as we get employed to look to pay even above minimum wage. And not a situation where the minimum wage is set and we have employers who struggle to pay a minimum wage, as low as it may be. So that conversation has to be in context as we move it forward. And so that's just what I will add to what you just said, Chair, as well as St. Pat.
Thank you very much, Dayton. And for since we also serve on another committee that deals with productivity, and funnily enough, I was having that conversation with the chairman of that board about productivity. But these are critical things that we have to think about, as you rightfully put it. I will say though that for most employees, to be honest, most employers rather, they actually pay above the minimum wage, and so I think they're mindful of that. That the minimum wage is actually the floor, and most persons tend to facilitate above that. But so that being said, you've heard from the three commissioners. I would hope by now that the questionnaires are out, and we are here pretty much to hear from anybody in the audience what their thoughts are and what their opinions are with regards to the national minimum wage. I know I will probably hand over to you, Madam Chairperson, and we would love for you, because we're actually taking notes and interacting with you, that when the individuals are called upon, if they could just simply identify themselves by their name and the organization that they represent, and if they don't represent an organization, they could simply be an employee or a worker. Just simply to say that, because the information that we, believe it or not, the information that we gather from these consultations are extremely, extremely important in our deliberations. So, Madam Chairperson, I will hand over to you for your staff or your members there to facilitate either questions or suggestions or thoughts from the audience. Thank you.
Thank you from one chair to another. Chairman? And
Yes, thank you very much,
Commissioners of the National Minimum Wage Commission. We have been very accustomed to hearing of the term livable wage. There is quite a buzz in the last announced minimum wage, and you have the opportunity, a few of you can indicate if it is that you want to weigh into that conversation. We will have the mics being passed around. I see one hand over here. Any other persons to weigh in? All right, so I'll start here.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Afternoon.
I'm supposed to say my name? Okay. My name is Dawn Gordon. I represent the Trial Club, falls under hospitality. I'm the HR director. I just wanted to have an idea, the thinking behind question 2. Do you think there should be a separate minimum wage in Jamaica for household workers, example, domestic workers? And my thoughts behind this, should we have a separate minimum wage and you gauge that in comparison to another worker who may end up falling below the domestic worker or household worker? How would you balance that? Because that position may in some way be more technical or more senior to the household, not to look down on the household worker at all. But how would that be managed?
Thank you. That's a very, very good question, and that's a debate and one of the reasons why that question is actually on the questionnaire is a debate that continues to rage amongst us commissioners. And let me just give you a bit of context, and I think St. Patrice spoke to that to some extent. A lot of Jamaicans don't know that there are actually when we do make a recommendation to the minister, that we make a recommendation on 2 categories of workers. As St. Patrice said, there is the national minimum wage, which speaks to everybody else except the industrial security guards, and there's a minimum wage for them also. There's a school of thought among some of the commissioners, and which we are, as we said, currently discussing. Is there some usefulness about having a separation of minimum wage for different categories of workers? And it's not unique to Jamaica. But as you realize, it is in fact a very complex and very, very technical, as you have said, situation. The school of thought is from some quarters is that why have 2 categories of minimum wage? I mean, the security guard lives pretty much, or the one category lives in Jamaica as does the other, and so the inflation does not affect. For argument's sake, in this case, a security guard or a household helper, different from somebody who works in construction or even as a gas station attendant, or whatever it may be. And so that debate is there and rages on. Should we now have a collapsing of and having a joint or one unanimous minimum wage, which takes into consideration, or should we have a separation? And so that's the rationale behind it. Because we would love to hear from you as individuals what your thoughts are on it, etc. You made an excellent point about there's some services that are a little bit more technical and requires more, could be a little greater degree of skill or etc. or input, various different kinds of input, which might require a higher level of payment, etc. and so forth. Minimum wages associated with that. Again, that's one of the reasons why we put it there, to gather that type of information from you, that type of feedback, so that when we are in fact deliberating, we can actually have a very informed position around that type of thing. I don't know if the other commissioners have anything else to say on that. And I know St. Patrice, that's something near and dear to your heart also. So yes, go ahead, please.
I think you covered it. It is, we had many times deliberated on as to whether we should have 2 minimum wage as we currently do, as you spoke of. And the information varies depending on who you ask. We just wish to remind persons, though, that that is within the minister's remit to designate a particular category of work. And he could even expand it to have more than just 2. He could have as many as he so desires. There is no limitation I see, in the laws to prevent him from having more. And in times gone by, there were other areas that were designated as minimum wage earners. And so we need to just remind ourselves what the minimum wage is. It's normal to protect the persons who are most vulnerable, those who generally are not can organize themselves in some collective format. And most countries in the world do have a minimum wage to protect the people who are their most vulnerable, to guarantee them some basic subsistence, some basic form of living. And so the views are varied with respect to whether we should have 2 minimum wage or not. It is my personal view that 1 should suffice because a minimum wage is just what it should be, a minimum wage. That's my personal view.
The other Dr. Robinson, I don't know, Dayton, if you have any response to that.
No, just to share one other school of thought here, that there's a viewpoint that, employees all face similar economic conditions. And so, to separate, does it really make sense to separate them? If they have to go to the same supermarket, if they have to pay for the same education, if they have to do all of this, same security, why differentiate? So that's just one school of thought, all right?
Okay, great, thank you. Madam Chairperson?
Chair?
Okay, thank you, Doctors Robinson. We have the unique situation where we have 2 Doctors Robinson as commissioners of the National Minimum Wage Commission and St. Patrice Ennis. Thank you so much. I am not seeing any. Is there one other person to interact on that side? Okay. So I recognize that everyone is actually going through, or most persons are going through the questionnaire, and we just want to ask you to quickly complete the questionnaire to just record your individual thought and return to our ushers that are walking around. All right, thank you to the National Minimum Wage Commission. May we have a hand for the National Minimum Wage Commission?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
And
we look forward.
I am told that it is time for lunch. Am I correct? And the saxophonist is telling me it is time for him to play for us while we enjoy the hospitality. While we enjoy the hospitality of the Royalton Hotel. So, Mr. Gillespie, we're going to give you a few minutes before we ask persons to join the buffet.
session was one that was very informative, and you would have gathered some knowledge, some experiences that would have been shared with you, and certainly you're grateful just as the Ministry of Labor. So at this time, I'm going to take just a moment to share a token of our appreciation to these panelists, and I'll start with the gentleman at the end. All right, so on behalf of the Ministry of Labor, we really take pleasure in offering you a token as our appreciation of your contribution here today. So this is Dr. Lauren Marsh. So thank you very much. You're all
Miss Jennifer Chambers. Miss Chambers, I want to thank you so much for being here today, sharing our Labor Talk conference. You did not hesitate when we called upon you. So a special thank you, and we hope that we will continue to work to build Jamaica land we love. Thank you. Miss Tina Mae Davis. Miss Davis, such a pleasant smile. I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy schedule to be here with us today to share in our Labor Talk conference. Thank you so much, and all the best as we work together to build Jamaica land we love.
Mr. Libo, you have always been a support to the Ministry of Labor. Notwithstanding all your negotiations, you're defending the employers sometimes, most times, but we have managed to have a cordial relationship with you, and that's also one of the main reasons why you would have been one of the panelists. So for your role here today, I just want to say thank you, and I wish to share a token with you.
I'd say that the ministry loves me as I love the ministry.
That is true. Mr. Carrington. Certainly a pleasure meeting you. You have been very hospitable to the Ministry of Labor. Your team has been very patient with us. Yes, very patient. And not just your team that has been very patient, but you two have played a significant role in having us really, facilitating us here, and not just for your accommodation, but we thank you very much for the role you have played as a panelist, and I wish to say thank you. We truly appreciate it, and we wish to give you a token.
Miss Jackie Millington, we want to thank you on behalf of the Ministry of Labor and Social Security for being here with us today to share in our Labor Talk conference. We appreciate it so much, and we hope and we know that you will continue to work with us as we build Jamaica land we love. And thank you to the hard-working team that has just thanked our panel. And I want to say a special thank you to those who have joined us on YouTube. Your presence is just phenomenal. And without you, we would not have been successful today. So I want to thank all the persons that joined us on YouTube for your continued presence. And at this time, we bid you goodbye to YouTube, and we will hope to see you some other time as we have others in the series of presentations.